What is good, streaming people? Welcome to the President's Cup preview. I'm Tommy Tran, and we'll be joined momentarily by the guys from the First Cut podcast to break down what's to come in Melbourne, Australia. No time to wait. Let's get right to it. Refresh you on the players who will be competing in this tournament. Let's start with the Americans led by Tiger Woods. He's highlighted down at the bottom of the right. Going to be playing as captain. Now, Ricky Fowler replacing Brooks Koepka. Koepka with a knee injury, so we do have 5 first-timers on this roster, all within the top 20 of the world rankings in the USA, leading this series to 10-1-1 in the 25-year span. On the other side, the international roster led by Ernie Els, the lone President's Cup win actually at this venue, Royal Melbourne in 1998. You got 7 rookies on this squad. Ben On replacing Jason Day. Day with a back injury. Boy, it's tough though, right? A major champion, one of L's 4 captain's picks. Got a lot of experience, got that home course knowledge. Not going to be able to use that this week. And with that, let's say hello to the guys, Kyle Porter and Mark Immelman, for a nice lengthy chat on the 2019 President's Cup. And before we kind of get into the ins and outs, Kyle, let me have you sort of break down the format of the tournament. We're going to show the rules just again for everybody. And then Mark, I'll have you piggyback after that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, the President's Cup, when you compare it to the Ryder Cup. The Ryder Cup's only 3 days long. President's Cup extends into 4 days, and you've got foursomes, you've got 4-ball, and then you've got singles play at the end, just like the Ryder Cup. So you see day one, they start with 4-ball. That's 4 guys in one group, and you take, let's say Tiger and Ricky Fowler are together on the American side. If Ricky makes a 3, he makes a birdie on a par 4, and Tiger makes a par, you take the best score from those 2 guys and pit it against whoever's on the international side, and then it's match play. It's whoever wins the hole is 1 up, and if you don't, you have it and go to the next one. So, you know, on the foursome side, on the alternate shot, it's a little different. It's a little tougher. Because let's say you have Tiger and Ricky again, Tiger tees off, Ricky hits the second shot, Tiger hits the third shot, and you kind of just take it from there. So that gets a little tricky when you have to pair certain guys who, you know, maybe they don't play the same ball, or maybe one guy hits it a lot further than the other guy, or, you know, maybe somebody drives it poorly and leaves guys in bad positions. So the team play aspect of it is always fascinating. And then obviously when we get to Sunday, it'll be straight singles, and mano a mano as the international team tries to take down the American team.
Mark, what about the course here? What do we know about Royal Melbourne and how it should play this week?
Well, Tommy, Royal Melbourne is one of the gems in golf course design, designed by the legendary Alistair Mackenzie, who's done such golf courses as Augusta National, amongst many others. It's on the sand belt down there, and so there's a rugged, sort of a linksy beauty about the place. It's not that long. It's just a little bit over 7,000 yards. And so it sort of discounts length off the tee, but you have to be strategic, because if you sort of lay back to be safe, it makes for some very difficult approach shots to some of these devilish greens. Lots of slope, well bunkered. A feature that you'll see on the broadcast is bunkers are cut right up to the edge of the surfaces, very sharp edges with some facing that rumbles the ball down into these big, deep cavernous bunkers. And so it asks you to position the ball off the tee. It really places a premium on good ball striking with the irons. And then on these fast surfaces, if you're on the wrong side of the hole with some wind, you're going to have yourself a devil of a time. So you better bring your putter this week too.
So that's a look at the course. We sort of broke down the format of the tournament, although there is one small change, right, guys? There's a new rule here that each player should only be required to play 1 match prior to the final round. It's a change from when players had to do 2 or maybe more prior to the singles matches. Mark, I'll start with you, and then Kyle after. How minor is this, and what do you make of the change here?
Well, it's a minor change, but it's a major change for the internationals. If you look back to the Ryder Cup, it became competitive when the rule was made that the European captain could hide players who weren't doing that well, because in terms of world rankings, there's a major discrepancy between the Americans and the internationals. So now someone who's not playing that well, someone who might be a lower ranked player, Captain Ernie Els can sort of hide him for just a couple matches, whereas previously everybody had to play every session, so the depth and the strength of the United States team was shown up. So it's a little tweak, but I think on Captain Elsa's behalf, this is a big deal for the internationals.
Well, I think it's also interesting because you look at the President's Cup compared to the Ryder Cup, and it's kind of what I was getting at earlier. The President's Cup is 4 days. The Ryder Cup's only 3 days, so the Ryder Cup feels a little condensed, I think, at times. And the President's Cup, you might play somebody on day one. You might play, Joaquin Niemann on day one, not play him for the next 2 days, and then you see him again in singles, and you're like, wow, I forgot he was even in this event. So I think that part of it is interesting. And also, look, like you see Tiger up there, it's going to be interesting to see how he uses himself with this new rule. Now, I certainly think he's going to play more than once leading into the singles play. But as a playing captain, how does that affect kind of the way that he sets his own schedule in terms of on-course play with his team?
And Kyle, you kind of talked about it a little bit. It raises the question of why there's such a 180 between the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup results, right? The formats are quite similar, but they're polar opposite results. Is it strictly a schedule thing? And then, what do you see when you see the numbers sway in either direction so, big here?
Well, to me, it's a talent thing. I think we talk about all these pairings and all this, who's using what ball and, what's the course setup, where's the rough at. It's like, who has the better guys, and I think sometimes with the Ryder Cup, it does come, like the course comes into play a little bit. We've seen that with Hazeltine in 16, saw with Paris in 2018. I think I think the reason that the course comes into play is because those teams they're more equitable. The players on those teams are closer together in terms of world rankings, in terms of talent. And we look at the President's Cup, it's just not true. I believe the stat, I haven't looked at the world rankings as of today, but going into this, it was like 10 or 11 guys out of the 12 on the U.S. team were ranked ahead of everybody on the international team. So when you have that big of a disparity, and you have this long of an event, a 4-day event where there's so many points to be earned, it just takes the variable of like that. Anybody can win one match, but when you have a long event, it takes the variable out, and talent's usually going to win out in the end.
I want to keep this thing moving, but Mark, what do you see when you see the difference in records with the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup?
Well, Kyle nailed it. I mean, talent is a big deal, but for the international team, the unification of the squad with all the different languages and all the different countries, I mean, these are guys like Haotong Li, for argument's sakes. Most of the team do not see him, but for a few World Golf Championships events and the odd majors. So getting the team together and building that team unification and the culture inside of the locker room is always a challenge for the captain, in this case, Captain Ernie Els. So that's why Els has gone to designing this team logo where there's a unifying factor and each player gets to put their country's flag inside that, so they remain individual, if you will. So talent is a big deal, but melding 12 guys over a very short week, figuring out playing combinations, because you've got 4 sessions where you're playing as teams. Some guys don't get to play each other, so there's not the natural bond that the Americans who play all on the PGA Tour expressly have. So there's that challenge that's also brought to bear for the international team.
All right, so those are some of the trends heading into this week, and let's break down what we anticipate and what we expect out in Australia. We'll start with Team USA. Tiger Woods, first playing captain since '94, and that's Hale Irwin. Kyle, what else should U.S. fans be looking out for on the U.S. side this week?
Well, I think the thing for me is you look at some of these captains picks, Ricky Fowler replacing Brooks Koepka. Fowler comes in, last week at the Hero was the first time he's played since August. That was a really long break for him. He looked really good, though. Obviously, the Patrick Reed thing with him at the Hero World Challenge, he was a captain's pick. And then Gary Woodland and Tony Finau. Woodland was awesome last week at the Hero. He's playing really good golf. He's been playing really good golf all fall. Throughout the Asian swing, and then Finau, after the first round at the Hero, he was really good the last 3 rounds. So it's almost a thing where I do wonder, I think everybody on the U.S. team is really good, but I wonder how many of those captain's picks are going to maybe not carry the team, but I wouldn't be surprised if those 5 captain's picks you see there outscored the other 7 guys on the team when you get to the end of the week.
All right, so Tiger Woods, of course, some success at the Zozo. Patrick Reed, we anticipate maybe a little bit more booze than normal. He's going to get a few, maybe a few more. Mark, on the other side, you got Ernie Els, his international squad, looking for a big upset, right? So when we look at it, look, I know they've got the 7 rookies, but they're not ranked like the American rookies are. When you look at the international team, what's at stake here, and are they a viable underdog, do you think, this week?
Well, I think they're a viable underdog to answer that question because of the conditions, really, and the fact that Royal Melbourne's kind of linksy, so that does favor the international player. For me, for them to really make a splash over here, given the rookies, the leaders like an Adam Scott, like a Louis Oosthuizen, like Hideki Matsuyama, Mark Leishman, these guys have to get up and they've got to do their bit and earn at least 3 out of 5 points, because you know those guys are going to see action in every 5 sessions. Adam is the lightning rod for the team. He's the home guy. He's the lowest ranked player on the team. He comes in here after a miscut in the Australian Open, but he did play better in round 2. So if Adam can get a good tournament, Louis Oosthuizen plays well, and then you get Hideki and company playing well, I feel like that'll lift some of the rookies and allay some of the inevitable nerves that they're going to be feeling here throughout the tournament.
So we have the international team winning it in '98 at Melbourne, the Americans getting that rematch in 2011. And again, one follow-up here, Mark, because you have some experience in this format type, right? So we're listing sort of the rookies here with Hao Tong Lee and Joaquin Niemann. What would you sort of advise, and how do you think some of these young players should be approaching this week specifically?
Well, how they approach it, everyone goes through their own routine. What I see as I looked at this team, and when I spoke with my brother who's an assistant captain, there's some very natural pairings, whereas in the past, you've had to kind of fit people together, playing them in all of the sessions, where you got Ha Tong Lee and C.T. Pan, who you might see together, the Koreans and Sun Jae-im and Ben An. I think that's going to be a dynamite combination. So there's that element of comfortability, which is very important when you're playing alongside someone. When you just thrust together with a guy who you don't really know, you've never really played together, you don't understand his style, that is sometimes can put extra pressure on one. So I think some of this, where there's these natural groupings that go together, that's going to make Captain Ernie Els's job a little bit easier.
All right, guys, it's time for the picks in the President's Cup. We'll start with Kyle, then Mark. So we're looking for top point scorer and obviously the teams to pick to win. Kyle, what do you got?
Well, top point scorer, I'm going a little off the board here. I'm taking the odds. I'm going Webb Simpson on the U.S. side. He played awesome in Paris at the Ryder Cup. I just feel like, Mark and I always holler about Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele. I think Webb Simpson is right up there in terms of most underrated players in the world right now. And then on the international side, I've got Ben An. He replaces Jason Day on this team. I just think his iron play, look, we talked about it with Royal Melbourne. It's going to be fast. It's going to be fiery. It's going to be firm. It's going to take elite iron play to score this week, to put together really good rounds and a really good tournament. And Ben An's one of the best iron players in the world. Now, whether his putter gets hot is up in the air, but you see Ben An there at 14-1 to be the top point scorer. I love him at that number. I think he's going to have a really, really good week.
All right, Mark, what do you think about top point scorers international team? We've got it up right now here.
Well, the international team, I think Hideki Matsuyama is going to play really well. He's been playing super coming in here, and the iron game is on point, bar none. But I'm going with Sun Jae-im. This guy is incredible from tee to green. He's very reliable. He's not very long, so you can count on him to play first into greens. And in match play, that's a big deal because you can put some pressure on the other guy. But then you put him on the greens, and these greens, arguably the best greens in Australia at Royal Melbourne, Sun Jae-im is going to have a field day. So I will happily take him at plus 800. I think he's going to be a good bet.
All right, so that's a look at the top scorers when we look at the international team and the American team. Before I do let you guys go, let's have a little fun here, right? Let's fast forward, let's just say to Sunday and Monday. What do you think the big headline or storyline from this tournament will be? Kyle, I'm going to start with you.
Can I keep it topical and say that the U.S. team wins big despite Patrick Reed going 0-5 for the event? I think, look, I I know we're joking about the Reed thing at the Hero World Challenge, but I think it's going to be, I think him going to Australia, I think he doesn't totally know what he's in for in terms of the crowd there, the fanatics. Like it's going to be, I think the way he's received is going to be really interesting after the incident that he had at the Hero World Challenge where he's moving sand around. He gets, there's a penalty. He says, I didn't know what I was doing, all these different things. I think that part of it is going to be really fascinating. And he loves to play the heel, so maybe he goes 5-0 instead. But I think that I'll go with that as my headline for next week.
Kyle, that's a fun one. Before I go to my headline, I've got to say that as far as the U.S. guys go, I think Justin Thomas, is going to be the man. He earned 3.5 points at Liberty National the last time, and he's got that intensity that lifts the entire team. As far as headlines go, I think Captain Ernie Els' rookies are going to do the business. I really do. I think they're a rambunctious lot. I think Royal Melbourne suits them. They don't have scar tissue, which has been a big talking point with the internationals. I mean, these guys haven't been parts of these previous routes that the international team have had. So I feel like the rambunctious group of rookies rout Royal Melbourne a little bit, and they turn some people's eyes, definitely.
Enough for the victory there, Mark, or are you thinking just well enough to be competitive here?
Ish. This is so hard because I'm South African born but American citizen now. I'd love to see the internationals win, but I just think there's way too much ammunition on that American team. I think it'll be close, but I think the Americans pull it out.
All right. Our thanks to Mark Immelman and Kyle Porter. Check them out on the First Cut podcast. Again, that's a great look into the President's Cup. Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it as always.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, so here's a look at the President's Cup. Again, Mark Immelman and Kyle Porter both like Team USA to get it done. They also handed out their top scorers on each side, both the international roster and for the American. The First Cut podcast, look, these guys on their latest pod went into depth a little bit about Patrick Reed at the Hero World Challenge, also getting you caught up, of course, on other things in golf. You got Kyle Porter, Mark Immelman, the staples of the First Cut podcast. Make sure you download, subscribe, and rate today.